Why, hello there, my very abused and desolate YouTube channel. It is I, Tanks and Tank Accessories, and I will be going over the initial history of tanks. I'm talking about from start to, I guess there's no real finish to tanks, as if, you know, they're kind of gone, because they're not really gone. They're still kind of here, but we don't use them as much as, the British in World War One needed them, which is exactly our transition. You see, from 1914 to 1918 was the World War Uno, which, I mean, most of us should know. If you don't, they didn't teach you much in school, so that's very sad. But anyway, from about 1916, British was like, hey, we got this new little secret operation, making tanks. And they made it, the name tank comes from how they would word, they couldn't make it like, because of spies. It couldn't have been something like, main destroyer or something like that. It had to be something, that could be passed off, like water tanks, So they named it tanks. That's where it comes from. Tanks. So anyway, in 1916, the British revealed the Mark I, very original name. The wars it fought in were World War I, the Russian Civil War, and the Second World War, but only for about 2 seconds. The weight of this thing was 27 tons. This was light for today's tanks, but when it was first unveiled, this giant, weirdly shaped thing on treads that nobody knew was, especially for the Germans who were facing this thing. It was very long and very huge. It was used for getting over trenches and having, infantry come up from the rear. I mean, you can't... the bullets at the time, the German 7mm Mausers were okay at the time. I mean, they did the job, but it was alright. Couldn't go through the armor, so it was a big play by the British, you could say. So it can only go 3.7 miles per hour, so it was very, as they would say, not that reliable. It would get stuck a lot. The enemy would know it's coming, of course, so, it was a very big disadvantage, but it did what it wanted to do. Needed to do, which was getting over trenches, and it had 2 machine guns on the side to fire from. So, I mean, that was that. French, Germans, they made their own tanks, but they were small little things. The German one was literally a giant metal cardboard box. So, I mean, if that's anything to go off of. Fast forwarding things to more interesting, the World War II section, the German tanks, more specifically the Panzerkampfwagen 6, aka the Tiger. It's almost the most up there with the Panther as most recognized, World War II tanks, which were the big boys. I'm talking about 80mm to 100+ millimeter cannons that would just shred the Allied tanks. I mean, they were just no fight. The thing weighed 54 tons. The max speed was 45.4 miles per hour. So, German ingenuity at its finest. The Germans, they used it in tandem with other Cat family tanks, as well as the Panzer IIs, which were the most common tanks rolled out by the German army, but we're talking about the big boys, the big players. So, I mean, it was usually used as a main battle tank, sort of a tank destroyer role, if you would. I mean, I got different videos for World War II American tanks, and especially the M1 Abrams, which, nice little transition. For a while, tanks were kind of, after World War II, we started going into the more guerrilla and close-quartered, like Vietnam, the Korean War, which get those two switched. Being up there, surrounded by trees, you can't really get a tank through. So the use of tanks were very limited, you know, Afghanistan, we started using those, but like I said, we were in cities and stuff, so, you know, the biggest, most recent big tank battle was in 81 during the Storm and Desert Storm, so, okay. But that's my first video. That's all the time I got. My next video, I'll be doing an oral review of the M1 Abrams tank, so.